Walter Kaufmann once described Notes from Underground as the best overture to existential philosophy ever written. It's the book that made Nietzsche stop, pay attention, and learn from Dostoevsky. And honestly, it's one of my favorites for the very same reason. Because no other novel captures the inner world of a deep thinker so precisely. The consciousness, the sadness, the despair, and the endless self-interrogation that comes with thinking too much. Just like Dostoevsky said, how can a man of consciousness have the slightest respect for himself? So today, let's explore a difficult idea. Why do deep thinkers so often end up sad? And what does Notes from Underground reveal about the psychology behind that sadness? The underground man lives alone on inherited money, yet he experiences life as nothing more than a long, deliberate self-punishment. In the opening pages, he even refuses medical treatment purely from spite, proudly poisoning himself by ignoring his diseased liver. As he sneers, "I am a sick man. My liver is bad. Well, let it get worse." His refusal isn't bravery. It's self-destruction born from resentment toward the world. His despair runs so deep that he envies even the lowest forms of life. He admits, "I have many times tried to become an insect, but I was not equal even to that." To him, consciousness has made him so hollow, so dead inside, that he feels unworthy of being even an insect. This reveals just how far his nihilism and self-loathing have taken him. But his darkness twists even further. He finds a strange, perverse pleasure in his own suffering. He describes returning home on a disgusting Petersburg night, painfully aware of a shameful action he can't undo. The bitterness grows until it turned into a sort of shameful, accursed sweetness, and at last, into positive, real enjoyment. Yes, into enjoyment. Into enjoyment. That enjoyment, he explains, comes from the too intense consciousness of one's own degradation. The more clearly he sees his own downfall, the more he savors it. For him, despair is absolute. There is no escape. He insists there was no escape for you, that you never could become a different man. Consciousness itself becomes a prison. His deep thinking doesn't liberate him. It paralyzes him. His over-awareness hardens into complete inaction, and even when he tries to resist this fate, every rebellion collapses back into self-doubt. He confesses, "I was always the most to blame in everything. To blame because I am cleverer than any of the people surrounding me." He feels ashamed of his own intellect. So he retreats from the world, choosing inaction even as it corrodes him from within. Where the underground man's feeling of being too dead inside feeds his avoidance and self-loathing, his fear of real engagement shows up as arrogance layered over paralysis. He tells himself he's above petty conflicts, yet he secretly longs for them. He craves confrontations he never actually initiates. When he sees a tavern fight, he even envies the man thrown through a window. He admits he even went into the tavern. Perhaps, I thought, I'll have a fight too, and they'll throw me out of the window. But when a large officer simply lifts and moves him aside like a piece of furniture, he loses his nerve. "I could have forgiven blows," he says, "but I could not forgive his having moved me without noticing me." The moment was his to act, and he knows it, yet he retreats. He changed his mind and preferred to beat a resentful retreat. He even jokes, "Devil knows what I would have given for a real regular quarrel, but I changed my mind and beat a resentful retreat." This is the pattern. He longs for drama and dominance, but he flees. The second action is required. Afterward, instead of owning his humiliation, he lies to himself and others. When he writes to those former acquaintances, he brags about the gentlemanly, good-humored, candid tone of his letter. He claims his head ached and that he couldn't appear in person. And he frames this as noble dignity. He insists he was by no means so utterly crushed, but on the contrary, looked upon it as a gentleman, should. But the truth is the opposite. He is humiliated and hides it behind fake bravado. The same hollow performance appears after Liza, the prostitute, shows compassion toward him. Leaving her, he imagines himself in complete control. I have only to whistle, and you have to come with me, whether you like it or not. I don't consult your wishes, but you mine. He postures as a man of authority and confidence. But it is pure fantasy, another mask he uses to cover his fear of genuine connection. Deep thinkers often get lost inside their own minds, and the underground man is completely paralyzed by his. He famously declares that to be too conscious is an illness. For man's everyday needs, it would have been quite enough to have only half the consciousness. He even blames himself for everything, claiming, I was always the most to blame in everything, because I am cleverer than any of the people surrounding me. He feels ashamed of his own intelligence, admitting he is ashamed that he considers himself smarter and more self-aware than others. This hyper-awareness becomes so painful that he avoids human eye contact entirely. I have all my life turned my eyes away and never could look people straight in the face. His intellect, instead of empowering him, isolates him. Every time he even imagines doing something wrong, he collapses into guilt. He describes suffering agonies during every moral struggle, terrified that any mistake he makes will haunt him forever. Over time, this fear leads him to believe that change is impossible. It could not be otherwise. You never could become a different man. This belief becomes the cornerstone of his paralysis. He decides that nothing he does matters, so he does nothing. His self-loathing reaches such extremes that he even fantasizes about enjoying humiliation. He writes that, if I had happened to be slapped in the face, I should have been positively glad of it. I should probably have been able to discover even in that a peculiar sort of enjoyment, of despair. To him, suffering, the consciousness of being rubbed into a pulp, would bring a twisted satisfaction, because it feeds his belief that he is utterly powerless. This is the real tragedy. His overthinking becomes a cage. Every thought is analyzed, every feeling dissected, every possibility rehearsed until he is incapable of action. In modern terms, he is the purest form of analysis paralysis. He is hyper-aware, hyper-intelligent, hyper-observant, and yet emotionally immobilized. Even when he tells himself he is cleverer than his peers, that belief only deepens his loneliness and indecision. His intellect doesn't elevate him, it isolates him, trapping him in a cycle of insight without action, consciousness without motion, thought without life. The underground man's psyche is a battlefield where hatred and guilt clash endlessly. He resents others just as much as he condemns himself. Anytime he imagines acting boldly, he's pulled between erupting in anger and retreating into wounded conscience. Even simple, naive expectations from others can push him to fury, yet he forces himself to hold back. After his humiliating encounter with Liza, he even vows revenge. I dimly felt that I should make her pay dearly for all this. He burns with resentment at her lack of submission, even as he shrinks helplessly before her. His anger and fragility coexist in the same breath. His bitterness spills over into cruelty toward those around him. In a moment of desperation, he torments his elderly servant, begging for sympathy. If you won't go, you'll make me a miserable man. You don't know what this woman is. This is everything. His indignation screams, "She owes me," while another, quieter voice inside him realizes how deeply he is failing himself. Despite the rage swirling inside him, when it comes time to act, cowardice takes over. In that same scene, he panics and even imagines running into the night to escape the consequences of his own cruelty. Shouldn't I run away just as I was in my dressing gown? and then let happen what would? He is too frightened to inflict real harm, so he turns the punishment inward. Humiliation becomes his self-administered justice. He confesses that during his government job, he merely amused himself by bullying petitioners, while a competing impulse within him pleaded for kindness and connection. His mind is a storm of contradictions. He hates being powerless, hates those who dominate him, yet cannot break free from inaction. His vengeful fantasies crash against the wall of his own shame. Every surge of fury is swallowed by self-doubt. The cycle repeats endlessly. Anger that never becomes action, and despair that only feeds the anger. And perhaps no line captures this tragic inner warfare better than his own confession. The more conscious I was of goodness and of all that was fine and noble in myself, the more deeply I sank into my mire, and the more ready I was to sink in it altogether.